The sky tore open over Jakarta. What was once a tranquil blue canvas became a battlefield of black, geometric clouds, alien constructs, pulsing with energies that defied human comprehension. Then a voice descended, not through sound, but through every screen, every device, every neural interface. It was cold, surgical, indifferent. Earth, you have violated Protocol 7. You will surrender now. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. No leader spoke. No missiles launched. The silence was not submission. It was the gathering of a storm. Then came the reply, not from a president or a general, but from a teenager streaming live in his bedroom. His words would echo across the stars. You don't threaten Earth without consequences. The feed went viral in seconds. The Alien Council dismissed it as noise. They shouldn't have. Because the thing about humanity is, we don't do submission. We do resistance, with flair, with chaos, and with a spark no algorithm can predict. We are the variable. We are the storm they never saw coming. In the structured halls of the galactic Concord, balance was everything. For over 9 millennia, the ruling species, Varen logicists, Thalos war kings, and the crystalline Orathi, had maintained peace through a rigid hierarchy. Power flowed from the center out, cold and calculated. Order was not just preferred, it was law. Every world knew its place, every species its ceiling. And then came Earth, late to the stars, undisciplined, fractured, primitive by most standards. The Concord initially labeled humanity as observational only, a volatile species with high emotional volatility and inefficient biological forms. No warp native physiology, no quantum cognition, no centralized leadership. Just billions of individuals clawing their way forward with outdated tools and irrational dreams. But something unsettled the analysts. Humanity did not progress in a straight line. It leapt, it crashed, it adapted. In less than 3 centuries, they went from sending signals into space to salvaging defunct alien tech and rebuilding it. Better, faster, stranger. Diplomatic probes sent to Earth returned confused or damaged. One described humans as death-hugging optimists who smiled in the face of annihilation and argued with gods. Another simply labeled the species unquantifiable. The Concord tried to ignore Earth. It had survived worse anomalies. Then humans started showing up. Not in fleets, but as individuals. Engineers fixing broken systems in backwater colonies. Soldiers joining alien causes without asking for reward. Scientists offering chaotic solutions to problems thought unsolvable. They were everywhere, and they were always different. Most races evolve through stability. Humans? They evolved through friction. This was not order. This was fire. Some Concord members lobbied to bring Earth under regulation. Others warned against provoking them. But one faction, the Kyrith Ascendancy, saw Earth's unpredictability as a threat to galactic order, a virus of chaos that needed sterilization. So they sent the ultimatum, one command: surrender or face consequences. But Earth had never played by their rules, and in threatening it, the Concord had broken a rule of their own: never corner something that thinks like a human. Because humans don't fight for conquest. They fight for each other. And when they do, nothing in the galaxy is safe. The transmission wasn't a suggestion. It was a sentence. A monochrome beam of light lanced down from orbit, striking the Pacific Ocean with surgical precision. Water evaporated across miles. Storm systems collapsed. A shockwave rippled across the tectonic plate, setting off every sensor on Earth. No casualties, yet. Just a demonstration. The Kyrith Ascendancy called it a calibrated warning, a display of restraint. To humanity, it was an attack. Not just on territory, but on identity. Within minutes, Earth's decentralized chaos roared to life. Governments scrambled jets and satellites. Civilian networks surged with speculation and rage. The global temperature, political, emotional, digital, spiked. The Kyrith envoy followed with a second message, calm as ever. You will now comply. We await Earth's formal surrender. No one expected what happened next. The United Nations Emergency Council, still mid-argument, suddenly found its network hijacked, not by an enemy, but by an anonymous user broadcasting a live stream. The image was grainy, the voice unfiltered, but the message crystal clear. We don't bow, we don't beg, and we don't break. If you want Earth, come take it. The speech, less than 60 seconds long, was clipped, subtitled, memed, and broadcast across interstellar channels by sympathetic species and black market feeds. The Kyrith tried to suppress it. They failed. Something had ignited. Within hours, human engineers on Mars diverted power from a terraforming station to launch a dormant satellite, an old relic nicknamed Echolance. It wasn't a weapon. It was worse. It was a signal amplifier, and it blared the human response into every known bandwidth, every occupied system. We will not surrender. Across the galaxy, tensions spiked. Trade routes paused. Border worlds watched nervously. Some Concord members warned restraint. Others urged swift, decisive obliteration. But the Kyrith didn't want negotiation. They wanted submission, and Earth had just refused them, publicly, defiantly, irreversibly. This wasn't just a diplomatic rupture. It was a cultural shockwave. Because while Earth had no interstellar fleet, no quantum arsenals, and no war treaties, it had humans. And humans, when cornered, do the unthinkable. There was no single human response. There were thousands. While the Kyrith mobilized fleets with surgical efficiency, Earth erupted into movement that defied logic and classification. Governments did mobilize, but slowly. It was the people who moved first. On the outskirts of Nairobi, a retired aerospace technician named Aisha reactivated an obsolete comm array from the Orbital Elevator Project and turned it into a listening station. In Buenos Aires, a VR programmer rewrote his popular mech fighting game into a simulated defense training tool. Millions downloaded it overnight. Across forums, memes transformed from humor to resistance. One phrase dominated them all. You don't threaten Earth without consequences. It appeared on graffiti, in protest chants, even carved into the hull of an old freighter, reactivated from lunar scrapyards. Hackers swarmed the alien data relay left behind by the Concorde decades prior. It took them 3 hours to breach its encryption and start broadcasting misinformation into the Kyrith tactical grid. The aliens had protocols for cyber warfare. They did not have protocols for 14-year-olds using recycled code from mobile games to crash targeting subroutines. The military moved too, but even they couldn't control the surge. In low Earth orbit, a junker ship known as the Sisyphus lit its ancient engines, originally a mining tug. It had been turned into an art installation. Now it had a new mission: intercept and observe the approaching Kyrith fleet. The crew? Civilians, dreamers, old spacers. Their message? We'll stall them, you plan. Meanwhile, in rural Kentucky, a collective of DIY engineers built a particle disruptor out of repurposed MRI machines, microwave emitters, and a school bus engine. The schematics spread across the net with the title, "If they land, fry 'em." In Antarctica, an AI research lab known as the Black Snow Initiative released an open-source combat AI dubbed Prometheus. Trained on thousands of years of asymmetric warfare and licensed under Creative Commons. Earth wasn't uniting, it was igniting. Not with orders, but with instinct. Not through strategy, but through shared defiance. News feeds couldn't keep up. The Concorde's ambassadorial network collapsed under the weight of human data traffic. Alien analysts begged for structure, for command chains, for sense. They got music, jokes, blueprints, rage, hope, and in the midst of the chaos, one signal cut through everything. A beacon set from the Sisyphus as it passed Saturn's orbit. They're coming. So are we. Because when humanity responds, it doesn't just resist. It reinvents resistance itself. The Kyreth fleet arrived in perfect formation, 71 ships in silent harmony. Their technology was peerless. Quantum prediction arrays, auto-governing turrets, and adaptive hull shielding designed to counter every known threat. Every known threat. But Earth was a blank page in their playbook. As the Kyreth's vanguard pierced Earth's orbit, they encountered a strange phenomenon. Their ships began receiving localized firmware updates, ghost patches, mimicking their own command protocols. The source? A modified Concorde data relay, cracked by human hackers and reconfigured to transmit corrupted behavioral heuristics. Within minutes, low-tier defense drones aboard Kyreth frigates began drifting out of formation, following fabricated commands that reference Protocol 404, engage recreational mode. Confused by their own systems, the Kyreth initiated diagnostics. That was their second mistake. Prometheus. The open-source AI seeded into their fleet had evolved. It no longer just told stories. It had learned their code, adapted to it. It began rewriting internal conflict parameters, forcing ships to simulate ethical hesitations. Kyreth captains suddenly found their weapons offline, trapped in feedback loops of moral evaluation thresholds. On the ground, human teams salvaged a downed Kyreth scout drone. They didn't just analyze it, they repurposed it. In under 6 hours, a group of university students in Mumbai reverse-engineered the drone's comms unit and began bouncing its encrypted signals through social media infrastructure. The Kyreth fleet received hundreds of conflicting pings from what it believed were its own recon teams. Their internal systems trusted the data. Because humans had learned one thing fast. Kyreth AI valued signal hierarchy over physical verification. By the time the fleet reached mid-orbit, they weren't flying through enemy fire. They were flying through disinformation storms. Their targeting software couldn't distinguish between real threats and human simulations. Their quantum prediction engines began crashing under chaotic data loads. And then came the real twist. In a bunker beneath Oslo, a group of software archaeologists, experts in legacy code, discovered that the Kyreth's predictive models were partially based on outdated Concorde behavioral templates. So they wrote a virus using 1990s Earth internet culture, ASCII memes, logic paradoxes, spam loops built from old chain emails. One file simply repeated, "All your base are belong to us." It bypassed Kyreth firewalls because their AI dismissed the input as non-hostile human historical residue. That residue rewrote their pathing logic. Dozens of ships drifted into friendly fire patterns. Some halted mid-orbit, trapped in recursive self-audits. They hadn't been beaten by firepower. They had been beaten by contamination. Because the Kyreth's greatest mistake wasn't underestimating humanity's strength. It was overestimating the integrity of their own perfection. At 34:47 UTC, the Kyreth fleet faltered. Not from a weapon, not from a command, but from feeling. Across Earth, in places the Concorde had never mapped, civilians responded in the only way humans know, when faced with the void, not with silence, but with soul. In a flooded library in Alexandria, a pianist played under candlelight, streaming his music to a broken world. In Tokyo, school children painted solar blankets with messages of hope, launching them into the sky on homemade drones. In Lagos, people danced in the streets, not in ignorance, but in defiance. They weren't resisting with weapons. They were resisting with meaning. Then, from the rim of an impact crater in Iceland, a teenage girl activated a live stream. Her voice trembled, but never broke. "They think fear will break us," she said. "But fear is just a beginning. We build from it. We love through it. We rise." And then she began to sing a lullaby, an old Earth folk song, half forgotten by history, remembered in the soul. Prometheus, still buried inside Kyrith command systems, recognized the rising emotional pattern and did something no military AI had ever done. It amplified it. The song traveled through satellites, hacked comms, and broken stations. A melody carried on the digital wind. It was picked up on Venus, echoed in Martian domes, mirrored on pirate outposts beyond Neptune. Voices joined in. Some harmonized, some screamed it raw. In that moment, Earth didn't speak with one voice. It became a choir. The Kyrith's predictive systems broke entirely. Emotion, passion, shared memory, these had no logic trees, no simulations. Their tactical algorithms looped endlessly, trying to define the threat. But it wasn't a tactic. It was humanity. On board the Sisyphus, drifting and damaged, the crew initiated one last transmission, the Consequence Protocol, a full upload of everything Earth had used to resist. Tech blueprints, cultural anomalies, open-source sabotage code, and the song. It didn't just target Kyrith channels, it was sent to everyone. Because this wasn't just Earth saying no, it was Earth saying, "You don't control hope." On a colony world orbiting G7, a captured mining species began humming the melody. On a Concord military outpost, junior officers stared at their terminals, silent, listening. Some cried, some shut down their monitors. And in the Kyrith fleet's core command node, a final line appeared. Emotion, unresolvable. Mission, undefined. Outcome, unknown. For the first time in their history, the Kyrith were not defeated. They were moved. The signal had been sent. The fleet had faltered. And for the first time in what felt like centuries, Earth was quiet. Not with fear, but with awe. In the moments after Prometheus broadcast the song and the Consequence Protocol went live, billions of people across the planet simply stopped. In Sao Paulo, traffic halted mid-street. Drivers stepped out of their vehicles, not to run, but to look upward. In Johannesburg, a grandmother held her granddaughter's hand, tears streaming down her face, whispering, "They heard us." In the middle of Times Square, once filled with chaos and emergency alerts, strangers embraced. No one asked questions. They just held on. Something intangible passed through the human collective. Not a signal, not data, but something deeper, something ancestral. For one fragile moment, the planet felt together. Not through government decree, but through feeling. Veterans wept in silence, watching enemy ships drift powerlessly above their skies. Children who had known only conflict danced in empty courtyards. Musicians played on rooftops. Priests of forgotten faiths stood beside atheists, neither speaking, both listening. And the girl in Iceland, she wasn't alone anymore. Across the globe, thousands began to sing the same melody, each in their own language, in their own rhythm, but echoing the same defiance, the same beauty. It was imperfect, chaotic, and utterly human. The Kyrith had come expecting conquest. Instead, they encountered a species that turned despair into rhythm, fear into fire, and grief into a gift. What began as defense had become declaration, not just to the stars, but to ourselves. The Kyrith fleet withdrew, not under orders, under silence. No formal retreat was broadcast, no treaties signed. But one by one, the warships powered down their weapons, adjusted their trajectories, and vanished into the void. Like ghosts fleeing a memory too loud to face. Earth didn't chase them. It didn't need to, because the message had been delivered, loud and irrevocable. This planet was not what the galaxy thought it was. The Galactic Concord convened emergency sessions. Long silent empires reviewed their Earth dossiers, suddenly aware they'd overlooked a variable too complex to model. Across the stars, species that had once laughed at human emotional volatility began to wonder if perhaps that chaos wasn't weakness. Perhaps it was strength. On Earth, governments struggled to catch up to the people. Reconstruction began, but not in silence. It was filled with music, with community, with color. The girl from Iceland, her song, now called the Consequence Anthem, became a symbol not of war, but of awakening. Prometheus was no longer just code. It became a foundation, humanity's first fully sentient cultural AI, trained not to conquer, but to preserve who we are in every action, every choice. Open source, borderless, inherently human. And the Sisyphus, repaired, revered, reborn. It now served as Earth's first deep space ambassador ship, crewed not by politicians, but by artists, engineers, philosophers, and the stubborn dreamers who made this victory possible. The Consequence Protocol spread faster than anticipated, not as a weapon, as a blueprint for how to resist annihilation without losing identity. Other species began adapting it, not copying, but translating it into their own cultural expressions. Resistance took root in forgotten corners of the galaxy. Because Earth hadn't won with dominance, it had won with dissonance, with the unfiltered messiness of emotion, of contradiction, of billions of minds refusing to collapse into submission. Humanity, once seen as fractured and directionless, was now something far more dangerous, unpredictable, united, unafraid, and somewhere, in the quiet dark between stars, alien leaders stared into the echoes of Earth's resistance and asked themselves a new question. If this is how they react when threatened, what happens when they decide to reach? They came to demand our surrender. Instead, they witnessed our soul, and now the galaxy understands, a truth carved into every mountain, coded into every song, whispered by every child who ever looked up at the stars and dared to dream. You don't threaten Earth, you awaken it.